7 artistic directors of the necessary stage and co-artistic directors, co-artistic directors of the M1, the very famous Singapore Fringe Festival. Alvin directed more than 70 plays, have been staged locally and at international festivals. He has been awarded a Fulbright Scholarship in 1998, was conferred the Young Artist Award for Theatre. In 2010, Alvin was conferred the Chevalier des Arts et des Lettres by the French Ministry of the Culture in recognition of his significant contribution to the arts. In 2014, Alvin was conferred the Cultural Medallion for his artistic excellence and contribution to Singapore's art and cultural landscapes. Please, a very warm welcome to Mr. Tan.
Can you hear me? It's clear? Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here to share with you the theatre practice that we do. The name of the company is The Necessary Stage, and what we do are all mostly 100% original works. We started in 1987 at the university, and at that time there wasn't enough local plays. And because we are in a multicultural society, we tend to get different actors together and try to investigate the different cultures and different languages. And along the way, we develop a kind of method which is a kind of collaborative method, and we try not to have too much of the hierarchy working. So the playwright and the director and the actors are all collaborators in that sense. Also because there are different kind of cultures, and we are looking for different cultures and sensibilities to be represented. What we have now called interculturalism. So it's not multiculturalism, because we feel that multiculturalism is not working. Multiculturalism is just different cultures existing in one country. And Singapore Tourism Board uses that to show how we are vibrant. But our interest is to look at the interaction of different cultures, which means the Malay, Chinese, Eurasian, Straits-born Chinese and all that live here, and Indians that live here, and what is it that happens when we interact. So I'm Straits-born Chinese, I'm Peranakan, meaning my ancestors came from China and settled in Southeast Asia, Malaysia and Singapore, and my ancestor married the Malay people here. So there's Chinese and Malay mix, and a new ethnicity emerged from there. So that's a product of hybridity, intercultural product. Eurasians are the same. They come from Portugal and they settle in Malacca in Malaysia, and they are called Eurasians. Yeah, so Singapore is unlike the other Asian countries. Other Asian countries have very strong mother culture, like France, right? So you have like Korea, Japan, Malaysia, India, Indonesia, whereas Singapore has been known to be like a cultural orphan, right? We don't have a strong mother culture because it's made up of all the migrants that come here. But the strength we have is to mix the cultures and to interact with the culture. So it's quite anti-purity in that sense. And Singapore becomes today a kind of example of a global village where different cultures can coexist, different cultures can intermarry, and a new, children of cross-parentage can be made possible. So that's what our theatre began to be interested in. The playwright that works with me, Harish Sharma, both of us had no theatre studies at the university. There was no theatre studies in 1987. I took literature, Harish took literature, I took sociology, and he took language, and he focused on social linguistics. And we both took process writing, means how you process creative writing and journalistic writing and all sorts of writing. So these three subjects have gone into our theatre making. And the sociology part is very strong because what we do is we go for field work and interview people. So it's socially engaged. So your title is Work to Live and Live to Work, right? And that's what we are interested in. Our work is called socially engaged data. In the past, socially engaged data is looked down upon as not artistic enough. But in the 90s and all that, a lot of data people try to recreate socially engaged data by not prescribing any solution, but still make the work very rooted in social cultural conditions. So in the plays and the performances later on in socially engaged data, you have different viewpoints and different perspectives from different cultures. But in the end, you don't have a solution, right? Like one playwright used to say, today's solution becomes tomorrow's problems. So I like the quotation. There is no arrogance to actually prescribe a solution. There's no idea of utopia, no recommendation of utopia, just to show this is what I've observed in life, and let's think about it and talk about it, yeah? When we were doing this works when we started, off-center was a play on mental illness, and we went to the mental institution to interview the people. And that was an eye-opener thing for us, because before that, we were doing plays that were close to our concerns. Our first play was about us graduating to become a person working in the workforce. Yeah, and a lot of early plays reflected on our direct needs and direct concerns. So we just have to interview each other or investigate into ourselves. But when we did mental illness or center, we had to go and interview people with mental illness, those in the hospital, those who are in the halfway house, and those who are at the aftercare services. That means they've come out already. So that was interesting, because it is the artists having to look at people and interview people and get to know people other than ourselves. So for example, when we were talking to a student, at first the student got into mental illness because he wanted to score all A's, and he studied until he had a breakdown. So we wanted to talk to him, and at first he didn't want to talk to us. Later when he talked to us, he didn't want to let us go. And then we asked him where he is working now, and he stopped talking to us. So we asked the social worker, why is his behavior like that? And we found out that in Singapore, you have to fill up a form when you work, and you have to fill up whether you have a history of mental illness. And if you filled it up, you either don't get the job, or you get the job, but you get half the payment. So not full salary. So that's a discrimination. So because of that, the social worker would tell the people with mental illness not to reveal. And that was why when we asked him where he's working, he wasn't answering us. The other one is a history teacher who said that his neighbor would request, at a request program, would request a song for him. And then he would mock him through the song. And so he was upset on which date he went to his neighbor's house. His neighbor's house was what address and the license plate number of the car, and he took the dustbin can and he hit the boot of the car. So we talked to the social worker, and the social worker said, yeah, he hit the boot of the car, that's correct. The request program and the mocking of the neighbor, that is the voice in his head. So it's very interesting, because the fact is stranger than fiction, and when we actually do this kind of interviews, we begin to actually understand it from a local point of view. When we do research, we get a lot of foreign examples, yeah, and it doesn't match what we are doing. And at that time, when we started in 1987, we were looking for our voice. That means we have our plays are multilingual, different kinds of languages, and we used the subtitles to connect people. So in that sense, we can work with actors from the Chinese theatre and actors from the Malay theatre and actors from the Indian theatre. And that's what we begin to become very interested in. With Off Center, when we did the play on mental illness, when it came out in '93, it was commissioned first by Ministry of Health. But the things we researched on was so close to the truth that the ministry wasn't comfortable and they did not want the play to go on. And initially, they commissioned us at $30,000. And then we told them we want to go on with the play because there's so much work done on it, 9 months of work. So maybe you take back the money and we will go on with the play. So they took back the money and we went on with the play. And it was full house and it was of critical success. And then the government became suspicious because they were wondering where we got the money to go on. Because no $30,000, are we getting the money from foreign sources? So there was investigation made on us to find out where we got the money, and then they found out there was nothing, just that we were passionate. And it was very difficult at that time to describe what is passion to the government because they didn't understand what would motivate people to do the play without the $30,000, because $30,000 is quite a lot. What's interesting is that 14 years later, that play became the first play that was selected for the GCE O-level, first local play. And the Ministry of Education that selected it did not know about the controversy that happened in the past. They just chose the play because of artistic merit. And we also got into trouble because of another thing, forum theatre, which is a Marxist form. Forum theatre is when you do a play that 15 minutes and it ends in a tragedy. And then you invite the audience to come in and replace the protagonist to change the outcome of the play. So that form, because it came from Augusto Boal, which was a Marxist practitioner, because of that, the form was banned. And our company nearly closed down in '94 because of all this. But the National Arts Council chairman came in to save us and say we'll ban the form, but not the company. So I guess the point I'm making is to work to live and live to work. How do we do that in art? And artists often ask ourselves that question. How do we create an art that is, that reflects life and reflects it to the society? And when does it become dangerous, right? And when these things were dangerous, today forum theatre is no longer banned. And not only that it's no longer banned, the government is using it to work on their problems, right? So it's at a particular time it will be controversial, but at another time it's no longer controversial. And that's the thing in Singapore, when we work to live and you live to work. Things like that can happen to artists. Yeah, so that's the point I'm just trying to make. Also that because we have no voice, culturally, when we started, our literature, because we're a young nation, we have our literature. We don't have the language, the investigation of our cultural sensibilities. We studied Shakespeare. We read the footnotes. But when we did Off Center, where it was marked at O-levels. O-levels is the Cambridge, right, in London. So now they need to understand our culture and they have to read our footnotes and understand us. So the thing is that how do we focus on a country that's so small, and how do we gain that cultural confidence when it's a small country and it's very easily ignored by the world? Do we actually continue to push the play? Recently we brought a play, Best Of, which is a Malay woman trying to get divorced. and she can't get divorced because she has to get counsel from the Sharia court, and she has to get permission from the husband. So it's Singapore standard. You all know Singlish, right? Yeah. So it's Singapore standard English, but she code switches to Singlish, and she changes her tone to a English syntax that is spoken by her mother, right? So it's another kind of Singlish, but the audience who speaks English can understand. But we brought it to New York. There was a New York person there who was asking, why didn't we make it all just Singapore standard English so that it's understandable when it starts to tour. So that was when I was telling them we struggled with Shakespeare, we struggled with train spotting and all the slangs, and we struggle with international films, with French film, and we read the subtitles. So I think it's only fair that when Asia is coming up, that you meet us halfway and not have everything to be so easily put for you. And that's what I'm talking about, interculturalism. I'm talking about how we can meet each other halfway. I see the world today, the politicians are focusing on national security and maybe how to make the environment good to achieve economic goals. And the economists are focusing on business and economics. And no one is focusing on cultural difference. And cultural difference, we don't have the vocabulary to settle cultural difference. And that is why the whole world has a lot of problems now because of cultural difference, because we become a global village and we become closer, but instead of more understanding, there's more misunderstanding. So arts and culture becomes the sector where we can actually try to bridge the difference. When we have an ASEAN meeting, ASEAN is like Euro, right? And I was invited to speak. So it's the youth of ASEAN. And opening, there was dancers from 7 countries. And they are all dancing the different dance from different countries and the different flags and different costumes. And then after that, people dealing with economics and politics begin to talk, right? Arts and culture is never taken seriously. Arts and culture is used as a seat warmer, just to do an opening act and to entertain. So there is a soft power in arts and culture, and through which I think we can reach out and understand one another. So that's what we are kind of trying to do, to kind of understand difference. The other aspect of difference is interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary, right, or intermedia, which means trying to go into another art form, trying to work with dancers, movement, or multimedia artists. So that is the other thing that we are interested in, working with multimedia and all that. So I'm going to show you something which is called Frozen Angels. Frozen Angels was commissioned by Biomedical Ethics NUS because there's a biomedical department in Singapore. And the idea of cloning is around the corner. And they are very concerned that maybe the population might not be ready. So they asked us to do a short play, 45 minutes, and bring it to schools so that they can talk to the students. So the playwright wrote 3 short plays. One was about designer baby, the ability to design the genes. The other one was about a mother who was working in a organ transplant shop. It's now available anywhere in all the satellite towns. This is in the future. She's working there, but one day her daughter has kidney failure, and she asked for some help as an employee. And her office was telling her, we need $25,000. And she said, but that's what I would pay if I have to go to the hospital. I'm an employee, can't you help me? And they say, no, it's 25 grand. So there's progress in science, but the economics still rule. So what happens in the future if there's progress for science? Can we benefit from it? The other story was about a couple that was celebrating its 200th anniversary. And the wife was telling the husband, I want to stop taking the serum because all our friends have died and I want to die. So the whole question of whether monogamy is made for at the age where cloning can be successful. So they're very three short, interesting works, and it's done in interdisciplinary media. So, okay, I'll just show you.
Yeah, again, year after year, on my birthday, I'm 200 years old. I'm happy. Are you really happy? Because I'm ready to go. I love you, Joe. I love you as deeply today as I did the first time you brought me here. But I don't want to hear this anymore. It's been too long. I want to see. I want to know. I want to feel what's beyond this. It's just been too long.
The world was smaller from here. The lights are bright. The biggest ship is the size of my thumb. I can see my fingers in the sea. They're moving away from me, traveling to new places. But I'm not afraid, because I know the ships will come back to me.
I got a copy of Alvin. It's on the table by the front door. I've watered the plants, cleaned the shelves, changed the bed sheet, read the newspaper then. I've made coffee.
Your eyes are shining. The sky is mine. I'm with the person I love. The world is mine.
I love you. I'm joking. You and only you.
The light, your eyes. I see your eyes.
I told the doctor not to give me any more.
What is your idea of a perfect present?
Something shiny, something that will never fade away.
A perfect present is someone to be with, someone to walk with, someone to hold.
What causes time to stop?
When we watch the sunset, when we are together, time stops. Everything stops.
What do you remember most?
The day you proposed, the joy, pure joy.
What happened yesterday?
I couldn't see the sunset. I was waiting. I stopped waiting.
Yesterday I closed my eyes. I cried in the dark.
What will you do tomorrow?
Tomorrow I will wake up. I will water the plant. I will read the newspaper.
So it's basically her getting him ready, that, when she goes off. But it's done with two screens, and then there's also like a shadow behind and in front, and what you saw was the live feed, but the webcam is above, and the other one, the webcam is the other side. So just to kind of defamiliarize the perspective, yeah. And then we had a cloning where we had one character had two presents on screen and one live, and the three clones are talking to each other. So we are able to use technology to actually kind of help support the content of the work. This other play was a collaboration between us and Japan. It's called Mobile 2 Flat Settees. And it was interesting because we were trying to talk to the young Singaporeans and the young Japanese. And the young Japanese, as you know, they don't know about the atrocities they have caused in Southeast Asia. It's not in the textbook, right? They only know Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the bomb that fell on them. Very few of them, because they're not taught in schools about the atrocities caused in Southeast Asia during World War II. So what was fortunate was because we had this soldier, this guy, he's lived in Malaysia for some time and is married to an Indian woman in Malaysia. And he is an actor. So when he came down to Southeast Asia, he began to get a lot of roles that depict a cruel Japanese soldier. So he was wondering why, and he started to research, and he started to find out. So at first, the younger Japanese were resistant. They didn't want to go there. Yeah. So we had another older Japanese who's in their 40s, both of them. The other one is the translator and the dramaturg. So these two Japanese who are 40 are talking to the younger ones about what they discover being in Southeast Asia. And then the younger ones started to trust the older Japanese and started to agree to create this work together. By the time, we did a lot of Skyping and all that, and by the time they came to Singapore, we brought them to the museums, that show all the World War II, and also to a cemetery where the soldiers are buried there. The cemetery was bought by a pimp who buried his sex workers. And this was before World War I, when Japan was poor and Japanese came out to work in Southeast Asia. And they sent the comfort woman over to Singapore to service the Japanese people who are working in Southeast Asia. So that was even before the World War happened. And then during World War II, some of the soldiers were buried next to the sex workers. And in this scene, it's very interesting. Is this jump time and space, right? So the old Japanese would meet a younger Japanese. So this general doesn't understand a modern Japanese, the guy behind, right? And how come he's marrying a Malaysian? So because the general is at a point where Japan was at its highest peak of nationalism. So when he comes to today's period, time travel, he's scolding the Japanese, like, how come the young Japanese man, how come there's no Japanese girl to marry? Why must you marry outside Japan? In this scene, he is talking about how his nationalistic allegiance to Japan is rewarded because he is at the shrine. But someone tells him, you're not at the shrine in Tokyo. You look around you, you're at the cemetery garden in Singapore next to the sex workers. And then he got totally upset. But it's interesting work to kind of get Southeast Asia and Japan to look into the past, to reconfigure the present, and to look to the future. But what's very interesting, because when the Koreans watch it, they felt we were too lenient, because the Koreans have a different relationship with Japan. But that's the point, right? When you do a play, the play need not have to represent for everyone. Then the Koreans have to do their own play, because their relationship with Japan is still toxic till today. Whereas for Singapore, they occupied us for just like 2 years, And in the 70s, 80s, our Prime Minister made a deal with Japan because they were economically ahead. And they say, you teach our Singaporean entrepreneurs how you go about things, and that's one way of compensating for what you've done to us. And so a lot of young Singaporeans have no memory of the war. It's all the manga and all the newfangled things. So we have a different relationship with Japan. We don't have, it's just our grandparents that have the angst, but not the younger ones. Sorry. That was the future in the play. How do I get it back? That was the future of the play. There is a woman in the play that keeps being reborn, and she keeps being reborn into tragedies. And in a way, she was paying for the atrocities that Japan caused. In the future, there is this young boy who is grown old, and in this future, the caregiver is a robot, is a computer. And he's trying to ask the computer to erase his memory. And then his mother appears. The mother is the woman that is reborn. The rebirth is the karma, and how a character can keep coming back to tragedies because of the sins of the ancestors. Sorry. Ah.
私たちの人生っていうそのちっぽけな1分、その1秒でさえ私たちは常に恐れを抱いて過ごす。
In the play, at the earlier part, this scene was on stage. So near this epilogue of the play, the scene is replayed on video. So it's all in his memory.
信じるのか。私は一瞬よりももっと生きました。私だけじゃない。そういう人は大勢いる。自分で選ぶことができないような生と死を運命づけられている人。土に帰った途端、再びまた蘇る人たち。輪廻転生を繰り返す人もいる。まだ始まっていない人もいる。私は生と死の狭間を行き来するのをやっと。俺の世界、俺の家族、歴史にとらわれちゃいけないんだよ。鬼のつかの間、俺は過去を忘れていられた。そしてその代わり俺は幸せだった。いや、あなた元気なの？ああ、メモリーがもういっぱいなんだよ。手紙見たよ。お母さんが死にます。でもね。
Okay, I'll speed up because I just got one more video to show. It's just here that here is where the mother is younger than the son. when we are doing interdisciplinary work or intermedia work, what is not spoken is done over the multimedia. When we started, we used multimedia as a way to circumvent censorship, because what we have to submit to get a license, we have to submit a script. So when we have this multimedia, we did not have to submit. But today, the censors want the multimedia as well, because we have kind of schooled the censors into knowing that we get a lot of these sensitive things over through multimedia. So, but for this particular project, the multimedia was able to bring about the war and those things that are absent in the Japanese history in order to make it present in the work. And a lot of things like the future also is absent. So the possible future, how do we make it present in the work? So in that sense, the multimedia has a basic role. It is not used to decorate. It is not used to make it beautiful on stage. It's just another actor. But what is its role and what can it contribute? What we call intertextual, or what we call collage, right? So you can collage the work on stage, where you have multimedia juxtaposed with a live performance. And that's what we continue to do when we are trying to collaborate with artists from different disciplines. My last one is this is road rage. Singaporeans have just become very angry lately. We are just like shouting at each other or quite rude on the road. And so the playwright decided to do a play on road rage. But we wanted to do social media and road rage. Yeah, so have a look. Okay, so before the audience goes for the play, you become a friend with one of the characters on Facebook. And then when they go in, you can actually interact with the character. So what was interesting was one of them provokes the girl, right? And she records. And when he records, after that, he uploads. But the audience in the theater sees that he had provoked her. But when it is uploaded on Facebook, it's only her that is going into vulgarities. So it looks like as if she is sexist, she's racist, and everything. But people on Facebook do not know that she has been provoked. But in the theater, the audience can see the difference between what's uploaded and what is the real thing that happened. So there were all these experiments we did with social media and road rage and the responsibility that is there when we are looking at things that come up on social media. Yeah. So basically that's the range of stuff we do. It's intercultural, and the other one is interdisciplinary. both of which have concerns about the other. It's either the other ethnicity, the other nationality, or the other discipline. And when we work with the other, it is not easy. It's a lot of tension, trying to understand the other side and what they do and try to empathize. And there's a lot of negotiation that needs to take place. I think Singaporeans are known to have very low threshold for negotiation because we are a culture of pragmatism and we are a culture of hierarchy. We don't negotiate, we just want to use power. So when anything goes wrong, we just like, okay, where's your manager, right? Where's the minister? We have no patience to kind of work things out with one another. So by doing this kind of interdisciplinary work, intercultural work, it puts us in a position where we have to actually collaborate and not compete. Yeah. So to live and to work and to work and to live is something connected to that. And how do we improve the situation in which we live in? What are the possibilities of social transformation? It's more looking at, what is this? Okay, it's more looking at what you do to yourself at work immediately, rather than just talking about change. How do you actually actualize the change in the way you work and live? Yeah. Okay, so I think that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. We don't have so much time because we have to.
Yeah.
If you want to take some two questions.
Okay, authors that inspire me, one is Carol Churchill, she's a British playwright, and the other one is Wooster Group, which is American, and I've studied both of them very intimately because before I left to do my master's, I had a set of questions, like I was telling you, how to create a work that is socially engaged but not prescriptive. And both Carol Churchill and Wooster Group are the artists that were socially engaged but brought the socially engaged kind of aesthetics to the 80s and 90s. So yeah, I got other authors like novelist D.H. Lawrence, a lot of British, Virginia Woolf and all that, because I took English literature for 3 years in the university. So a lot of that inspire me still when we do the work. If you're alone on the island, which play do you bring with you? I think I'll bring one, it's just one play, is it? Then I'll bring one of our plays off center. Okay, you have to, okay, Singapore is a communitarian country where communities live together but do not mix. Yeah, that's an interesting question because when I was young, the communities mixed more. There was more interculturalism when we were young. And you can see the language, like Malay language is borrowing something from Chinese and Chinese borrowing something from Malay. Like sabun. Sabon is soap, right? Somehow it came to Asia and sabun is Malay. And when it goes to in Chinese, it's sabun. So it's this kind of communication because the Chinese and Malay are talking and trying to understand each other, so the word gets transferred. So if China, the Chinese people in Singapore, if they bring that word back to China, the people in China won't understand because there's a whole list of words that are emerged from interaction of different cultures in Southeast Asia, in Singapore. So there were more interaction when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Now, because of the language policies and all that, people are getting more and more segregated and separated, which is to our detriment. So that's where we see our role. So when we did the play on Best Of, which is on the Malay girl looking for divorce, when the playwright interviewed 4 Malay women undergoing different stages of divorce, a SEP school student, SEP school is where it's all Chinese, and you take first language Chinese, literature in Chinese, everything in Chinese. So a girl stood up and said, "Thank you for the play," because the play was in English. The intonation is Malay syntax, but the word is still, the language is still English. So they understand it. So it is Malay world brought across through English to another language speaking group. So that's how we are trying to inform one community to another community. I give you an example. The woman that has a schizophrenic daughter, right? So she has a monologue, and she says, "This country no good, people no good. When I sell food, I wear badge. Badge says smile, I smile. I go clinic, I go hospital, I see poster. Poster says smile, I smile. I see doctor say how many percent mother mad, how many percent daughter also mad. He smile, I smile. Then I see social worker. Social worker say how many percent take medicine can become better, how many percent don't take medicine cannot become better. She smile, I smile. I come home, I see mirror. I cannot laugh, I cannot cry. I can only smile. So that the sentence structure is Malay, but is translated into English, and then it becomes poetic. And through English, then the whole of Singapore can understand. But the ideas, the sensibilities is from Malay. So that's what Singapore interculturalism can offer. When we work internationally, we use that method as well. Yeah. So what else? What best advice would you give to a foreigner to discover Singaporean culture? I think if you go for Singapore plays, I know foreigners who have gone and say that they learn so much in just watching a play than if they go for touristy kind of activities. So if you go for a play that is done by a Singaporean company, I think that's one. Two is to talk to Singaporeans. Are you able to find friendly Singaporeans? Or do you find it difficult to interact with Singaporeans? Go to theatre people. Theatre people are always more open, friendly. Intern with a theatre company if you have holidays, or sit in for their rehearsals. We have a lot of foreigners who actually intern with us, sit in for rehearsals, and then during the break time get to know the Singaporeans. Social media, what is the next step in theatre innovation? The social media and multimedia and all that is still not exhausted in the use of it. We are now creating a work. It's called The Ghostwriter, and it's based on Tagore. And we are now how we are doing it is the playwright has written the script, but we put the script as we read the script, and we put the script aside, and the choreographer and the musician working with the actors to move and get the vocabulary clear between the relationship of the sonic artist and the choreographer. Just get the idea and move. So we dislodge the relationship of acting and performing from the words, the playwright's words. And they are creating their own vocabulary. They've been doing it the past 3 days now. And later on, we will put the text in. And the text is going to come in through people reading it, through subtitles, in another way totally. So it's this what we call disembodied. And the multimedia is going to help. So the multimedia have a different role to play. So the innovation, I feel, will not end as long as the artists in different disciplines find new ways to work with one another. There's quite a lot of permutation. It's just that this kind of interdisciplinary working needs a lot of time. You need a lot of time to communicate, to discuss, to process the work. My company is trying to get enough money to afford this, so that you do a lot of experimental work and not be pressured to creating product. So the innovation doesn't stop if the permutation of the different disciplines have new ways of experimenting with one another. And different musicians and different choreographers will do differently. We have presently a choreographer from Laos, and he does a lot of street dance, but he lives in France. This guy, the choreographer. And we have a musician who creates his own instruments, and from his own instruments create music. So it's really another thing altogether, and he is trying, his objective now is not to use his music as lubricant, as background, just to make it pleasant. So the performance on stage is one way, and his sound is going ding, 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 ding. It's quite alienating. But at the same time, it's interesting. And we have an Indian classical dancer dancing and a contemporary dancer dancing. So we had to have 1 year and a bit to actually find a vocabulary of all these elements coming together. It's a lot of work, very laborious, but also very fulfilling.
Maybe Mr. Tan, the last question. This one sounds good. The first one, we'll be able to fully understand tonight's piece without your explanation.
Yeah, it's going to be challenging because, okay, there's us. It's going to be challenging. But you will enjoy it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.